and welcome to the Oak Spring podcast, where we celebrate the legacy of Mrs. Bunny Mellon through the work of the Oak Spring Garden Foundation. I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Season 2, Episode 12. On our final episode of 2025, we take a look back at how the Oak Spring Garden Foundation was formed back in 2016 when Marguerite Harden joined Oak Spring Garden Foundation and Sir Peter Crane to establish the foundation. We'll be hearing from Marguerite in just a moment, and then later we'll be hearing from Danielle Eady, of course, is our program director here at Oak Spring, and about the programs, the workshops, the courses that have evolved over those recent years since her tenure here at Oak Spring. Marguerite, welcome to the Oak Spring podcast. Thank you for taking time to join me early on a Colorado morning for you.
Oh, yeah. No, thanks for having me.
And I'm curious as to your background, of course, because you were there right at the very beginning, or before the beginning, in a way, of the Oak Springs transformation to what it has become today. So let's start, if we may, with a little bit of your background and your early introduction to Oak Spring.
Sure. Well, Oak Spring really fell in my lap because I was at the Yale School of the Environment, where the president of Oak Spring was the former, at the time he was the dean of the Yale School of the Environment. And so I had studied both climate change adaptation, and I was taking half of my classes at the Yale School of Management, so at the business school, which really gets the rap of being the do-gooder business school. Because they offer just a lot of benefits and classes in nonprofit management. So, my classes at the School of Management were around philanthropy, nonprofit management. I had previously run a nonprofit in Hawaii, and I went with the intention at Yale to try to get onto the other side of the funding table and try to give out grants and do more of the funding rather than the raising of funds. And so I had run the Yale philanthropy conference at the School of Management. And, when it came time to be looking for a job, philanthropy is a lot of who you know, and, the network of funders is very close-knit. And so I actually was talking to a group of friends, and Peter Crane as the dean walked in at a happy hour and asking people what they were doing after graduation. And at that point, we all knew he was going to go to Virginia to start a seed library, is what everyone thought his next plans were after being the dean of the school. And, but we knew it was also a philanthropy. And anyway, I had mentioned my background. And after that, he had kind of just offered me the job to kind of go down to Virginia and start this foundation. And I really thought it would probably only be a summer or a couple of months. And I would get to kind of see what it looks like to start up a foundation, which is a really unique opportunity. So yeah, the job really kind of fell in my lap. I didn't have long-term plans to stay in Virginia, and it really kind of fit with my interest in philanthropy.
And your brief at that time was what exactly, Marguerite?
Yeah, my assignment was really just to go down there and kind of, I became known kind of a little bit as its right-hand person, but to kind of assess the situation and understand what kind of a program we would launch. And really at that time, I was not told. He did not understand. No one understood that the foundation was a private operating foundation rather than just a private foundation. So I actually initially jumped deeper into the legal and financial side of the foundation before we could even get into some of the program development, to be able to understand, one, how much money we had, two, how much money we had to spend, and three, what we could spend it on. We really didn't know any of that.
And this, we should remind everybody, is 2016. And you actually stayed for 3 years, was it?
Was it 3 years? I believe it was. Yeah, that sounds right.
So what was your first impression then as you arrived with this big assignment, really, and what could be an historic development, really, for the property, for the area, with the changes that you were about to make?
Yeah, well, I'd say it was pretty overwhelming. And something we would often say was that it felt like we were sipping from an exploding fire hydrant and trying to figure out what direction to take the organization, what direction to, there were just so many assets that the Mellons had. As Bunny Mellon got older, things became less active, but on site at Oak Spring, but it still really, it still really had so many fascinating aspects to it. And so, we were confronted with, well, there's this amazing library. It's a space of not only capturing the history of plants, but art and culture. There's this estate of thousands of acres that are reflective of their ethos in conservation and care for the environment. There's all of these, mostly at that time, dilapidated buildings that we didn't know if we should raise them or, turn them into something and do some sort of historic renovations. There's, of course, the garden, which has the history of her, working with the Kennedys. You had these bedrooms that Jackie Kennedy stayed in. It touched so many different corners of, the mission could have gone in any direction: art, conservation, fabrics.
With so many pieces of this on your desk all at once, as you said, it was overwhelming. How did you prioritize then within the framework of your remit?
Yeah, Peter Crane has such a long history of working at Kew Gardens and of having just a deep connections across many different areas of expertise. And his approach to management was just something I learned a lot from. And it really was going annual budget by annual budget. And we kind of took a more investigative approach, an approach to piloting programs while doing the things that we knew needed to get done no matter what. And one of the harder parts of approaching Oak Spring, I think, and from a management perspective, was that we came into a site that had, hundreds of employees, which was already more of a quote unquote skeleton crew for the Mellons. It got smaller as Mrs. Mellon got older. And, but that staff really was used to serving the Mellon family. And so, and you had a whole mix from security guards to an entire kitchen of staff to the librarians who have some deep expertise in what is in the library, to the gardeners who had an expertise in the plants and landscape. You had the landscape management team. So you just had such a huge staff. And that was the biggest part of our budget, was paying the people who served the Mellons, who grew up there and maybe started, the head gardener, the librarian, they all worked there when they were teenagers and worked their way into their areas of expertise from, learning directly from Mrs. Mellon. And so, they had just a deep love for the space, and yet we needed to transition from serving people to serving the public good. And that was really hard to not only communicate, but understand what was our mission, what was serving the public good in this light, and with these assets. So, that was just, we took it annual budget by annual budget, but a huge part of that annual budget was staffing. And how do you transition from, serving the Mellons to serving the public good? And so, it was a lot of capital investments outside of staffing. It was saying, well, we don't know exactly what we're going to do with these spaces, but maybe it'll be an artist residency. And in order to do that, we need to renovate all of these buildings and all of these homes. And so capital expenses took up a large part of the budget. And then while we were doing that, we piloted the artist residency through connections that Peter had.
So what were your target goals then, aside, from developing the residency and repurposing the property itself to accommodate the residences? If you could look over the 3 years of your 3 annual budgets, if you will, and the target goals for each year, could you just summarize those for us?
Sure. I mean, our goal was really to get things up and running. We had annual board meetings where it was really important to showcase progress. And some of that progress was activating the library, getting the land management into a more sustainable direction, right? Where you're not just mowing grass to mow grass, but really doing something for the long-term conservation of the space. And it was to, try to pilot some of the activation of the garden and the garden, library, land. And I would say then exploring the direction of taking the foundation into artist residency programs. And, at the beginning, I don't even think I knew what an artist residency program was. And so it was just, we knew had to do something with art. It's the Mellons. They had a storied history with just art philanthropy generally, but also the museums in DC. So yeah, it was really exploring that and exploring how to activate those spaces.
So with hindsight now, what did you feel you accomplished in those 3 years that established the organization and made it operational with its new purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really proud of having just sort of steered the entire space towards serving the public good. Moving it away from a private residence to a public asset, not only from capturing the history, we also launched an entire space that tells the story of the Mellons that, is really a museum exhibit sort of space that people can understand not only Bunny Mellon, but Paul Mellon's history and how they came together in philanthropy. But yeah, I'd say that was the biggest success, was really transitioning a space of individual wealth to community wealth. And yeah, serving the public good.
How did you feel that your vision for the Oak Spring Garden Foundation evolved as you accrued knowledge of what was what the target was, the goals?
I think all of us had a slightly different vision for the space, whether you were talking to Peter, his wife Eleanor, me, and then everyone who worked there. They had been stewarding a vision of the Mellons long before we got there. And so everyone had a little different interest in the space. And I think our diversity of interests kind of came together to serve what we hoped would be Bunny Mellon's vision. We always expected to find some sort of guide or direction as to where she wanted to take the space. And all we really had, we never found that, but all we really had was her life and the things that the Mellons gave to guide us. So I think that my personal vision really was that nonprofit mission and serving the public good. Again, like our diversity of interests really brought the foundation closer towards what it is today. And yeah, I think really Peter's leadership and melding a lot of those interests is really unique.
And how do you feel now, with the benefit of hindsight, to your contribution during that time and how the program has grown here at Oak Spring? You must have a sense of pride, I would imagine.
Yeah, thank you. I thought professionally it was such a unique experience to be able to understand not only from a business sense how a foundation is started, but just from the honor of understanding this wealthy person's, vision and intent, and really trying to make that come to life in a way that's really meaningful. And I think, we laid a strong foundation, but I really think it's the leadership of the organization that, and Peter's time won't always, he won't always be the leader of Oak Spring. I think that it has a lot of potential no matter who the executive director is. So yeah, I feel good about that part of it. I feel like we started on that mission, and I think that's a lot of the feelings I've had since leaving that kind of space.
So it changed your appreciation of what was possible then?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that no matter what leadership takes Oak Spring's mission towards, it will serve, there's so many assets there that can be serving the public good in so many different ways. And there's just so much potential, even still, for how it can serve the public.
Well, Marguerite, thank you for taking time to come on the podcast and share your reflections of your time here and the transformation that you've seen now from being there at the beginning of it all. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Chris.
Well, joining me now is Danielle Eady, who is the Director of Programs here at Oak Spring. And Danielle, having heard from Marguerite, your predecessor, on the work that she put in to establish the foundation, she then handed over the reins, we should say, to you and your team for actually carrying out the operation here at Oak Spring. When did you actually start? Take us back to that transition and handover from Marguerite.
Yeah, so I got here in August of 2019, and that's when Marguerite was stepping away. So I was able to overlap with her for about 2 weeks and pick her brain and learn what went into her thinking as they were laying out the groundwork for our programs and operations here.
And you came with a view to doing what exactly? Because I know your role has expanded considerably as the foundation has evolved in what it wanted to become. So it was a transitional and learning phase too.
Yeah, exactly. So when I started working here, I was really working with the artist residency and fellowship program. So my background is all both making art and working with artists in both curatorial and education type roles. So I was really excited to move here and be stewarding this new artist residency program that was centered on place and landscape. That was the type of role that I would have described as my dream job, but didn't really think would ever happen or would really come to fruition. So that's what brought me out here. And that in 2019, that was just a few years after the program was started. So the residency was piloted in the spring of 2018. So 4 artists were invited out here. That was before many of the houses where the residents now stay were renovated. It's before many of the studios had been updated. So it was definitely just a test period to see what's it like to be here for several weeks. What are you drawn to? What would you like to know more about? And then from that, there were about 2 more sessions of artists in residence who came and stayed at Oak Spring, were competitively selected. And then after that is when I started working here.
There's an interesting history to the old Rokeby farm, though, how it was in days gone by when this was a horse farm to what it has become with all the properties that were available to it. It was an interesting change of hands that it got sold and then bought back. Tell us about that, because I think that's an interesting piece of history and how all of those properties now where the artists in residence now stay when they visit Oak Spring, how they were all renovated. That was a huge operation.
Yes, it was. So that's been a really exciting thing to see in my role. And I actually lived on Rokeby Farm when I first started working here. So I saw a lot of the renovations taking place. So there's about 10 houses over on Rokeby Farm, and those homes were built throughout the 20th century to house different employees of the Mellons. So that ranged from farmers, gardeners, electricians, plumbers, all sorts of people were housed on Rokeby Farm. Not all of the staff had housing, but many of them did. So they were living in those houses. And then starting around the 90s, after Paul Mellon passed away, Mrs. Mellon was selling off surrounding tracts of land. It was just too much for her to manage at that point in her life. So a lot of these houses weren't lived in for a good 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So when the foundation decided to sell the property, to sell Rokeby Farm, the thinking was, this is just too much to take on. We can't renovate 10 houses. What will we possibly do with this? A year later, after the property was listed, the foundation changed our minds and decided to keep that property and to go ahead and start one by one renovating those houses. So now all of the houses have been renovated. We've also renovated different former farm buildings and garages, and the Rokeby Farm is where the former Mellon airstrip is located, which is decommissioned now, but very much in use by the foundation for our large brush compost, and just a really scenic, amazing space to walk, bike, and it's a mile end to end. So the buildings that are along that airstrip include the former kind of command tower as well as the firehouse. Those are both artist studios now. So those were places that were updated and renovated to serve our artists. And also Rokeby Farm is where our biocultural conservation farm is now. So as the residencies were growing and as the houses were being renovated, the idea emerged that we should also be growing food in a sustainable way to feed the visitors who are coming to stay on Rokeby Farm. And then now that our biodiversity conservation team has been in place for several years, they also have a number of restoration projects in some of the former horse pastures over on Rokeby Farm.
You mentioned that the airstrip has been decommissioned, so if I wanted to fly into Oak Spring, then I wouldn't be allowed.
That is sadly correct. Yes, we do occasionally get that phone call, but we do not allow landings.
Okay. Well, the expansion has obviously there for all to see now, the development of the program. But let's talk about some of the specifics of what it involves for you, Danielle.
Yeah. So growing the program, one of the key decisions that Peter and I made about a year after when I started here was around 2020 or 2021. So at that time, there was the artist in residency program, and then there was a much smaller and separate researcher residency program that was really designed for scholars, for historians, and art historians to come utilize the library collection for just a couple of weeks, working on their own projects that related to the collection. And so that was separate from the residency. When I started, Peter and I had a conversation about how or why we wanted to keep these two groups separate. And we ended up deciding to meld the groups together to create what we now call the interdisciplinary residency, which the thinking is these are all creative people. These are all people that are passionate about plants, landscapes from very different angles, but there might be ways that they intersect, and there might be projects and ideas that are spurred from bringing people from different disciplines together. So that's been one distinction that we've worked to, and I would say has definitely gained momentum, is this interdisciplinary focus where a cohort has artists, it has researchers and writers. And then over the past, since 2021, we've also had a couple science-focused fellowships, our fellowship in plant science research and plant conservation biology. And the runner-ups for that are also selected for our interdisciplinary residency. So there's also scientists in the mix. So that's been one area that has really grown that program and has allowed us to really utilize that space.
And now, if we look at the roster, explain to us, with all the residential short courses that you have, explain how they have evolved and how you've made the decisions you have in choosing the courses and the residences and the workshops.
Yeah, so when I started here in 2019, I think the foundation had hosted maybe one class with Michael Gage, And so there was definitely a testing and incubation kind of period with our residential classes, which are hosted primarily on Little Oak Spring Guest Stay in our broodmare barn, which has now been renovated to be beautiful overnight accommodations. So there was a lot of testing and figuring out how long can we really host people for a class. So we started with classes that were about 7 days long. Now we really focus on classes that are Monday through Friday, and even some classes that are a bit shorter. So a Wednesday through Friday or a Monday through Wednesday. And sometimes for those shorter classes, they'll include a few Zoom components beforehand so that people can get some of that content before they arrive and then be really immersed in the place once they're here. So the way that those have been developed is to think about the different resources and assets that exist at Oak Spring. So that might be our biocultural conservation farm, that might be our landscape or our library collection. And we've tried to fill out a calendar that addresses all of these different and unique aspects of Oak Spring and bring in a really extraordinary leader and teacher who can guide the students through that class. And these instructors are people that we work with very closely, that are very well acquainted with our staff. We're in touch with them throughout the year, and they know some of the longer, bigger projects happening at Oak Spring, and can really utilize their knowledge for the students.
So beyond the courses then and the residential programs, there's also, as you say, the workshops and the other lectures and events that you have, and all under your remit. So talk a little bit more about those, Danielle, and so people understand all the different offerings that there are here at Oak Spring, and specifically if they're not even an artist looking for a permanent residency, there's a lot more that they can do by visiting here at Oak Spring, the various events.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the thinking behind our one-day events, which include workshops, lectures, talks, is to have some ways for people to be involved with the foundation, but to not need to come and stay here for a full week or for a full 5 weeks. So those are open to the public and can be registered through our website. And those range. Many of them are taught by the Oak Spring staff. Charlotte from our biodiversity team leads different walks and talks. And then there's events that Alyssa Montgomery, our head gardener, will lead, including our winter wreath making. And then there's some where we'll bring in an instructor. And sometimes that's an instructor for our short course who arrives a few days early. And then they'll lead a one-day walk or they'll lead a lecture in the library. But the idea is to meet our local audience, especially, and provide opportunities for them to engage with our site. I kind of like to think of our residencies as having a national and even international reach. So those are people who it really is worth it to come here for a longer period of time. Our short courses are mostly for a regional reach. People do come from Virginia, but they do come from the whole mid-Atlantic and occasionally farther away. Again, when you're here for Monday through Friday, it can be worth it to come from a little further. And then our one-day events are really for our local audience. And that does expand to Maryland and other surrounding areas. We have people coming in from DC. So we like to have a little bit of everything for everyone.
Yeah, and we want to talk about the exhibition space now, though, because that is something that's evolving, isn't it? From, for the different exhibitions that Oak Spring has chosen, specifically that relate to the work of the Oak Spring Garden Foundation. So talk a little bit about those, if you would, Danielle, and what we can look forward to in 2026. Yes,
so we have been thinking about exhibitions both on-site and off-site. So at Oak Spring, we do have a gallery space. It's not ginormous, but it's a couple of rooms with some built-in display cases. And in that space, we're able to display things from our library collection. So that has been one primary focus, is to use the gallery to showcase items from elsewhere on site that you might not be able to see if you just come here for a one-day tour or lecture or talk. We try to bring all groups through the gallery so that they are seeing some of those special parts of the collection. So exhibits in the past have included some about the textile and linen collection that Mrs. Mellon amassed over her lifetime. The exhibit that's up now is about Mrs. Mellon's relationship with Jackie Kennedy Onassis and the design of JFK's memorial site in D.C. And then upcoming in 2026, we'll actually have two exhibits. The first one is Curious Allies, which is a traveling exhibit that the American Society of Botanical Artists offers every 3 years with New York Botanic Garden. So the theme for this exhibit is carnivorous plants, fungi, and lichens. So a lot of very funky, cool, interesting plants, some of which are very, very small, but you'll see drawn and depicted at a much larger scale in that exhibit space. And then in October of 2026, the gallery will change over and have an exhibit about tulips featuring work by one of our alumni artists, Sarah Horowitz, who had the opportunity to go to the Netherlands and create etchings and watercolors of a historic garden there. And then that will be supplemented by some of the beautiful, wonderful tulip illustrations from the library collection. And I should say that Curious Allies will also include some works from our library collection that we'll curate in to complement the works on display, which are all by contemporary artists. So this on-site gallery space is something that's definitely, I would say, developed over the past few years. We're now able to plan further in advance and really utilize that space. And that's a big attraction for our garden tours too, is that people who come year to year to see our formal garden and see the beautiful plants and flowers that are in bloom also have the opportunity to see a different display in the gallery space. And then something that we've also been doing lately, especially this past year, 2025, is loaning artwork to other institutions for offsite exhibits. That includes at the Garden Museum, the Museum of Women Art in DC, and then a couple museums in China. We've also had works loaned to as well.
Now, I know that booking for these courses and residencies, Danielle, that happens months in advance, years in advance. And I also hear a lot of alumni that want to return, of course, as well. So there's a lot of logistics involved with the actual planning of course and workshop and program attendance. Talk a little bit about that and how far in advance and the kind of the numbers of that over the course of the year, and how far ahead you have booked, say, for 2026, and what might still be available.
Yeah, so we do book very far in advance, which makes things easier for our staff, that they can plan their projects, and it makes things easier for our guests, that they know what's coming up when they need to make travel arrangements. So the way that it works is that we think about the residencies and fellowships most furthest out, I would say. So it's 2025 now, the end of 2025, but very soon we'll be working on the 2027 resident calendar and slotting in our residencies and fellowships because they are here for longer amounts of time. So we want to make sure that's on the calendar. And then around that, we'll look at our short course calendar, and we time those around Virginia Historic Garden Week's open day tours, which we always participate in April. And then we have a couple open days in June. So we slot our short courses with these other big events that we have going on as well. And then after that, we'll fill in our one-day workshops and lectures. So at this point in December, we do have all of our short courses for 2026 set. All of the dates for those are on our website. And those are all application-based, but the application cycles open about 3 to 6 months prior to the actual course. So people can apply to those throughout the year. And then after those short courses are set, that's when we start slotting in most of the one-day lectures and events. If we're bringing in a guest speaker who is maybe from farther away, those we do tend to plan out closer to 6 months in advance. And then some are planned out maybe four or so months in advance.
And, of course, all of this information about the courses, the workshops, the events, the exhibitions and programs are available, as you said, Danielle, on the website osgf.org. I'm wondering if there's any new programs, any new developments that you can share with us at this point that you're looking to in the medium-term future.
Yeah, so in 2026, we do have a new short course coming up, which is called Vine to Glass, and it's a viticulture-centered class that's in collaboration with Lost Mountain, which is a winery and vineyard, formerly called RDV, that's just 10 minutes away from Oak Spring and is a internationally acclaimed vineyard. So that is a Monday through Friday class in November of 2026, and it will focus on the actual growing of grapes. Peter Crane will give a lecture in our library looking at some of the materials that relate to pruning and grafting grapevines. And then there will, of course, be several wine tastings as well, led at Oak Spring and at Lost Mountain. So that's a new class that we're really excited to pilot next year.
Is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know about the programs here and what you're looking forward to in the months ahead, Danielle?
I guess I would just say that I hope people will keep an eye on our calendar. And then one thing that I haven't talked about is our local education and outreach programming, which is slightly different than my team. That's all under the direction of Ginger Anderson, who is a former public school teacher and is an amazing educator. Very creative, very enthusiastic, and she has a team of educators working with her. And for those programs, we both bring students here to Oak Spring, and then they also go off-site to libraries and community centers. So while the programming I developed is mostly focused on adult programs that take place primarily at Oak Spring, occasionally off-site, Ginger's team has a whole array of programs as well that are really exciting. Many of them are for K through 12 students. Some are for senior citizens and some special adult audiences as well. So I would also say to keep an eye on Ginger's programs too.
Yes, and of course, Ginger came on the podcast a few months ago too.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and talked more detail about those programs that she operates. So I think that wraps up a complete overview of your work, and the transition from Marguerite to Danielle Eady has been seamless and progressive. And the word we like to use is all part of the continuum of Oak Spring.
Yes, that's right.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle. It's been a fun season of the Oak Spring podcast now as we wrap up for 2025 with this final December episode. Looking forward to lots more in 2026 and some surprises. We've got some new ideas, or you have some ideas for stories, for topics that we'll be covering here on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really looking forward to next year. And thank you, Chris, so much for all you've done for us and for the podcast.
Of course. It's an absolute pleasure working with you all. You know that. Well, a very happy holiday season to you and your team, Danielle, and thank you for joining me here on the podcast as always.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for Season 2, Episode 12. But before we go, I'd like to point out a couple of things that will be happening as we look ahead to January 2026. We'll be offering a second viewing of the Sophie Granville screening on January 22nd. And January will be part of our build-up to a busy February when we'll be hosting Giovanni Alloy for an on-site and off-site lecture, a release of the Snowy Campbell publication, and a new exhibit, Curious Allies, in the gallery. And we're also very pleased to announce that materials by John Bradby Blake will be travelling to the Garden Museum in London for an exhibition that opens in February. And as always, you can find out more about our programs, courses, workshops. That's all on the website at osgf.org. Don't forget to check us out there to keep up to date with everything that's happening. And also, you can sign up for our newsletter, either on the website or by emailing us at program@osgf.org. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Oak Spring Garden Foundation on Instagram. At X, we are Oak_Spring, and on Facebook at Oak Spring Garden Foundation. Again, everything that you want to know about Oak Spring can be found on the website, osgf.org. And that is a wrap for 2025 and for Season 2 of our podcast. We'll be back in 2026 for Season 3 with a lot more guests, a lot of interesting topics that we'll be covering, and of course keeping you apprised of all the happenings here at Oak Spring. So until next season, next year, a very happy holiday season from all of us here at Oak Spring. And thank you for listening.